Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting for Friday the 27th of May. Welcome councillors and staff. Anyone that's watching through your live stream, welcome to the meeting. I'd like to now open the meeting with the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Okay, we do have two leave of absence requests from Councillor Jones and Councillor Henson. I'll move that they be accepted. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Duff, those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Councillor Duff, the recognition of traditional owners. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge country and the land where we meet this morning, the Wakwaka land, and acknowledge the elders both past, present and emerging. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Just in terms of the agenda today, councillors, you have that in front of you. Declarations of conflict of interest. Now's the opportunity. Anybody? No? Okay, if you do throughout the course of the meeting, please let us know. We'll move on then to 5.1 at 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, whereby, I've got Councillor Henson here. Good morning, Councillor Henson. Can we just retract, Mr CEO, is it okay if we just retract Councillor Henson there? Thank you. Okay. All right. Confirmation of minutes of the previous meeting. It's recommended that the minutes of the Budget Committee meeting held on the 20th of May 2022 be received. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, second, Councillor Duff. Speakers, go to the vote. Those in favour, carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, business at hand, 6.1, internal employee skill development against external resources project delivery. That is at 14. And we'll go across to our Manager of Infrastructure Planning, if we could, I think is the author of this one, to provide us with an introduction. Thank you, Manager Darcy.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This was a request that came out of our original budget discussions back in early April around what are we doing to try and assist with elevating the capability of our staff internally and trying to reduce our reliance on external resources. This report will hopefully explain a lot of what we have undertaken over the past couple of years in order to try and achieve and assist with demonstrating that. And happy to take any further questions from Council as to the content of that or any detail that needs further elaboration, but wanted to help share the journey that we've been on in trying to do that to help with promoting the interests of Council, but also how do we actually get the best out of our staff and giving them the challenges that they also seek at the same time. So happy to take any questions, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Manager Darcy, and we have a comprehensive report provided as presented to us where it's recommended that Council note the report to assist with further development of the 2022-23 budget. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duff, seconded Councillor Potter. Speakers? Councillor Shoemaker.
Just a question, Manager Darcy, through you, Mr Mayor, just in relation to the engineer graduates that we have on board, I just wanted to understand how many we actually have currently working for Council and the pipeline for recruiting new ones. Is there, how does that actually happen? Is that through industry association or people reach out to us? I guess they're things I was interested in.
Through you, Mr Mayor, yeah, the first that I'm aware of, I think we have 5 with one vacancy to my knowledge, but that's across infrastructure, that's not within infrastructure planning in itself. What we also have is, through the recruitment space, we're very much in alignment with just industry in general. We don't actually go through any particular associations or universities with the recruitment. We go out to the broader market to the best of my knowledge, but happy to be corrected through our manager of P&C or the CEO of the knowledge in their space with this, but to the best of my knowledge, we go out to a broad market seeking anyone who is interested in wanting to work with us.
Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And just in terms of like cadetship, I'm not sure if that's what it's actually called. My apologies if it's not the right terminology, but if you're studying and then you're really you are just coming for those breaks in your study or for work experience, do we have those opportunities as well? That may be a question for you, CEO Mark, if not Manager Darcy.
Yeah, Manager Darcy, did you want to go first? And then we can come back to the CEO. Thank you.
I'll just briefly touch on what I am aware of, if that's okay through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, we don't currently have any cadetships within our within the infrastructure section of council. It is, to the best of my knowledge, that those cadetships do exist at councils in Queensland. But yeah, I'm not fully familiar with the pattern or of how that is recruited, nor the methodology on how that is undertaken. In all honesty, but yeah, happy to to work with council on that being an item of interest for infrastructure in the future.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, just curious with regards to, I know we talk about infrastructure, but, you know, planning and town planning is also another area that we seem to sort of be lacking a little bit in sometimes. The staff is pretty well overworked there. And I met someone recently locally who's actually studying town planning. And she wants to stay in with this area. So what are the opportunities for someone like that? As Councillor Shoemaker brought up, we were talking about those cadetships, and I know other councils do them, and there are some councils close to us that actually bring on cadets every single year, you know, they get a new cadet. So I'm just wondering whether that's something that we could actually look at within, you know, maybe further our parameters and not just look at engineers and infrastructure, whether we can actually expand out to other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
All right. Yes, it's a little bit ad hoc as far as the program goes when the opportunity, but do we do it? Yes, certainly is it in our planning? Yes, it is. The most recent planner through a separate council did exactly that program, supported her through her university, and then when her personal circumstances changed and she was down here, we picked her up and we supported her through her last year of planning at university. So do we do it? Yes, we do. Is it every year? No, it's not. And is it in our planning? Yes, it is.
Good. Thank you, Mr. CEO. Further speakers? Okay. Well, Councillor Hogan, sorry.
Yeah, I would definitely be very supportive of cadetships or whatever they're called, because I think it would be good to attract more local people, because they are going to have much more interest, I think, in the community, and some local knowledge that they could bring in. But I think it would be very good if we could do that. You know, as a parent whose kids had to move away, would be good to see kids be able to stay in our area as well.
Thank you, councillors. Shall we go to the vote? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, 6.2, Wondai CBD concept planning at 16. We'll stay with you. Thank you, Manager Darcy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This item was once again out of the last budget report back in April. And what it was a question around the tasks associated with the delivery of that plan, as well as the associated qualifications. I've provided a brief report there with a summary of dot points on actions, and in the closeout paragraph just highlighted some of the base qualifications associated with the delivery of those tasks. Happy to take any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Manager. Report as provided, where it's recommended that Council note the report and consider this item in relation to the development of the 22-23 budget. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Henson. Speakers? No? Okay. Up, yes, Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only real thinking around this one is more the time frame. So clearly there's actually quite a bit of work there to consider and undertake with this project. I guess I'm just thinking in terms of the planning process in getting it to a point where it's shovel ready. I'm just keen to understand sort of the proposed time frame for that work, because I recognise there'll be considerable community engagement as well. Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Manager. Time frame?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this point in time, excuse me, we're probably looking at the second half of next financial year, based on other commitments that we have at this point in time, other funded commitments, that is. So yeah, we would look to try and start bringing a bit of a framework back through council for probably early 2023, given that we're going through an analysis phase and trying to bring some of the structure together on what it could look like. It will still need detailed design off the back of that. So in all honesty, councillor, it won't be shovel ready. It is around bringing a bit of a blueprint to council, and from there being able to get your endorsement to allow us to then go and progress with that.
Just a supplementary question, Mr. Mayor, just through that process then, if we do that work in early 2023, do you see that as a potential project to put up for the 23-24 year in terms of that detailed design and actually going through? Would we have to wait another year to actually put shovels in the ground, or do you think you'd be able to do detailed design? I'm just thinking about budget cycles and actually what this looks like looking ahead. So if we could do the concept planning in the beginning of next financial year, you said then detailed design. So imagine we've got to allocate budget for that, and then at that point we'd be better informed about the scope and the actual cost of the project, and that would potentially inform our next capital budget, or we could look to do a quarterly adjustment if we were ready, I guess, or attracted funding. That's kind of my thinking, Manager Darcy. Just keen to sort of understand that pipeline going ahead.
Thank you, Manager. Then we might go, once you've got your comments in terms of your process, we might go back to GMO Mate and give us some advice in relation to what the planning is around the Works for Queensland funding. Thank you. Manager Darcy, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think with the timelines associated with budget development for the following financial, I probably would have some concerns in being able to achieve all the concept design and all the detail design and having something ready for budget deliberation on delivery. With next financial, there would be a fair body of work that would need to be undertaken in a shorter period of time with not a huge resource at my disposal. So at this point in time, I couldn't guarantee that we would have everything ready for budget determination for next financial year for that Wondai job at this point in time. Happy to work with council as opportunities arise, and maybe we have some resource opportunities that arise as well at the same time. But at this point in time, I couldn't say hand on heart that we would have everything ready for council to make a determination.
Thank you, Manager. We'll go to General Manager O'May in terms of our different funding programs and where this project sits in terms of our forward program. Thank you, GM.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so the Works for Queensland project, we had allocated the 700,000 for Wondai, but that had been earmarked probably for the footpath areas down south of the roundabout through Scott Street. So, currently in the Works for Queensland, and we do still have to confirm all of those projects in there. But I think this is more through the Mackenzie Street CBD area and that. So yeah, just depending on where that funding.
Sorry, mate. I think this is the Scott Street area, isn't it? It's from down where we have Data Wave and we've got Crow FM. Those areas in front of the butcher shop. It's that southern part of Scott Street. I think that is the area we're talking about. Could you just clarify, Manager?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Yeah. So the scope of the project is around that Haley Street roundabout area north through Scott Street down towards Edward Street. We're also looking at some of those interconnecting items of interest across Haley Street towards Coronation Park and towards back towards the museum area as well. But it's pretty much the highway is that southern boundary at this point in time, and Edward Street is probably the northern boundary.
So that was in the draft program for the 2023-24 year. There was 700,000 allocated or earmarked in Works for Queensland, which is yet to be confirmed.
And Manager, we have until 30 June 24 to spend that money, is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so if we're going to deliver on that $700,000 project under Works for Queensland, we would need to be in a position, committee, to obviously get work commenced get it completed in the 23-24 year, and clearly, Manager, you're raising concerns about the capacity to do that at this point in time.
I think it's probably just the timeliness, Mr. Mayor, on when we actually deliver that within the 23-24 budget. I may need some time in getting the detailed design through, but wanting to know what the quantity of that cost is very important for council as well at the same time. So, it is something that we may need to bring a report back to council for further consideration through first quarter budget possibly, just to help council with an informed decision.
Thank you, Manager. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I was the one who originally asked the question about the designing of this particular project and asked whether we needed to get external landscape designers, for example. But I was just wondering, do we need to do that, or because we're looking at that Botanical Advisory Committee, and I'm just wondering what their role is, because when you're talking about that down that bottom end, there's probably only a couple of gardens there, and I'm just wondering, is it necessary to engage external landscape designers, as you've suggested here, rather than just using local knowledge?
Thanks, Manager.
Oh, look, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think there's opportunities there to nominate things, but at the same time, we would probably be looking to engage with professionals to make sure that we do the justice of that project correctly, and getting their expert opinions is very, very important. I'm not a landscape designer, I don't profess to be. I'm happy to take the advice of qualified professionals on utilising their service for a particular project, and would probably seek their advice, but it wouldn't be a huge body of cost associated with that project because the scope is not large, the value of the project is not large, so there would be a finite amount of input, but at the same time it would be something that we would look to clarify through our staff as well, based on the recommendations of those qualified professionals as to the input that they provide into it.
Thanks, Manager. Councillor Erkins to the Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With regard to qualified landscape gardeners, I know we're pulling out a lot of trees, and I know a lot of people are complaining about trees that were planted on the advice of qualified landscape gardeners. You know, sometimes I think taking advice from locals who know what trees are going to be good for the area or what plants are going to be good is sometimes a good idea. And I do believe in Wandai there are some pretty well qualified gardeners.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. That'll be an interesting discussion to have into the future as we move forward as to how we actually look to engage with our Botanical Advisory Committee in having input in that. Councillor Shoemaker.
Just following up on some of the comments made, just wondering in terms of the discussion around the planning for this, is there an option to use external resources to do some of this work so that it was actually ready for that Works for Queensland allocation? We could actually deliver on the project with the Works for Queensland allocation. That's my question in terms of fast tracking this project. Is that an option to actually use somebody to support us with this project planning?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So, Manager, yeah, so we're really getting down to the nuts and bolts of it here. We need to get this project delivered by 30 June 24 if Council resolves to put it into the budget for W4Q. If we can access external resources, is that then achievable?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Yeah, absolutely. If a financial amount of money is made available to assist us with the delivery of the program, then yes, we should be able to hit that timeline.
Yes, with you, Councillor. Thank you.
Can we, I guess as a further question on notice or request for a report, actually have some work done in terms of what that resourcing capability looks like and those costs, so we can consider that in, consider a budget allocation for that, if not this year with the work that we're doing, because I understand we're undertaking this, but for the year ahead, what would you need to make this happen, I guess, and when would we need to fund that? They're my questions. If that could come back in some shape or form through you,
Yes.
Mr. Mayor, to the management team.
Thank you, Councillor.
What are your thoughts?
Yeah, Manager, you've got here $80,000. If you could perhaps elaborate on that, is that the figure we're talking, or could there be more money? Would that be over 2 years or 1 year? Your thoughts?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, the value and the tasks are in the report that has been presented. This is around wanting to get into the detailed design of it further, which we could then, we've already indicated that we would be able to then access the advanced design program through that money as well. But that is on the premise that we know what we want to do through the concept design phase as well. So we do need to accelerate a lot of the actioning, need to accelerate the consultation phase. We need to understand what we want before we go out to the community. So there is some real critical decision making early on in the piece in order to enable that timeline to be delivered as efficiently as possible to give council every opportunity in delivering that in next financial year, because there is a body of work that goes into that, and there is time in the background that is quite considerable.
Yeah, with you, councillor.
My apologies for the confusion. I just want to confirm the $80,000, I thought that was just for the concept planning, but are you saying that's for detailed design as well?
Yep, thanks. So, yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, the intent there was around trying to access that money for both the concept and the detailed design. If there is a commitment from council in going and delivering that project, which I'm starting to understand today, there's a higher chance of that occurring. At the time when that was originally drafted, it wasn't 100% known, but the indication certainly is strong that Works for Queensland is going to deliver on that. And from there, we should be able to go through the concept and the detailed design, but it is around a capacity issue for us right now. We would need to go and resource additional resources to go and facilitate that.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. We'll go to General Manager O'May, then back to Councillor Henson. Thank you, General Manager O'May.
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor. Just had a comment just regarding the Works for Queensland. We've nominally allocated that funding in the 23-24 year, but that is a 3-year multi-program, so that funding could be accessed, or a component of it could be accessed in the 22-23 year, so you could have, you could utilise some of that as part of this project. So if you were committed some in 22-23 and the remainder, but so you could use the 700,000 split over the 2 years if that assists in delivery.
Yeah, thank you, General Manager. And that probably leads into the next question, and I'm pleased we've got our finance guys and our asset management accountant here. In terms of, so in the OPEX budget for infrastructure planning, there was an amount put of 385,000. Now, I know that included Wandai. 80,000 for Wandai was included in that, I do believe, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Is there any reason why we can't capitalise that 80,000 rather than having it in OPEX? If we have committed to deliver on the project, the planning associated with the project, to me, would have, under accounting principles, be regarded as a capital cost because it's all part of the delivery of that capital project. So is there any reason, is there an accounting standard or a regulatory provision that prevents us from capitalising that so that we can take it out of our OPEX and put it into Works for Queensland?
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that is correct. If the project is something that's going to go ahead and is committed, then yes, those costs can be part of the capital. Yeah.
We'd need to consider that then, General Manager O'May, as part of the allocation under Works for Queensland. I'd also suggest, in terms of recent conversations we've had around construction costs, that the $700,000 figure was flagged a little while back, and that we may need to review the costing for this, Manager Darcy, in terms of services, materials, contractors, and we will need to, as part of that, also look at this cost here as being part of the project, if it's something that Council has appetite to progressing. Yeah. Would that be fair to say, General Manager Darcy, we will need to review the costing for this project, or Acting General Manager? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, through you, Mayor. Yeah, absolutely correct. At this point in time, the costs are indicative until James is able to get the actual full detailed design. You really are very broad-based estimates.
One step at a time. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Henson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, but that has answered my questions. It was in relation to funding and the costing of it. So, yeah, that's it. That was going to be my point, that, on delivery, that 700,000, and as you alluded to, that $80,000. So, yeah, that's been answered. In relation to the costings, we're talking 12 months down the track, and it's certainly extremely hard to do costings without that designing. So, yeah, and Lord knows where our costings are going to end up in the market and in the world we're living in at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Henson. Councillor Schumacher.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just thinking about how we give the team some I guess, a surety that council's actually backing this project and that we actually do want to in fact spend that $80,000 on funds from the Works for Queensland allocation and capitalise that amount at the end. Do we need to put a motion up today that indicates that for Budget Committee?
Yeah, it's a good question. Thanks, Councillor Schumacher. My understanding would be management that this will really swing off council's commitment to the project in our Works for Queensland capital budget. So I do believe we've got a workshop coming up on that, and I do believe that at some point in time we'll adopt our capital program. Once we adopt our capital program, we would then, if we committed to the $700,000 allocation, that would then, I imagine, give rise to us to be able to capitalise the $80,000 within that, or in addition to that. So that $80,000, to answer Councillor's question, would be built into the capital program if the project was given the green light by council. Would that be the process? Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. Yep.
Thank you. So it'll be a matter for the Works for Queensland budget allocation discussion and the capital program more broadly. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any further speakers in relation to this? No? Okay, well, thanks very much, Manager Darcy, for bringing that forward. We'll go to the vote on this. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thanks, everyone. Okay, the next one now is, where are we? 6.3, Water and Wastewater Proposed CapEx Program 22-23. That's at 17. And we'll welcome our Acting General Manager Lowe to provide us the reports, and we've got some spreadsheets coming around. Thanks very much, Acting General Manager. Yeah, over to you. Thanks, Acting GM.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Mayor, as this program is what we discussed at our workshops the other week, there's, do you wish me to go through the whole thing, Mayor, or just any changes that we've made?
Councillors, would you like a refresh through the detail, or are you happy just to go to a summary? Summary? Okay, we'll go to a summary. Thank you.
Okay, so Mayor, on the front page, that's just your 10-year summary. You will see in the you got your total 10-year summary, which gives us over in the yellow column there, gives us a sustainability renewals ratio of 152 over both schemes. That's water and wastewater. Excuse me. The renewals for this year for the water capital has gone up to 119% this year, and I'll go into the detail what changed since our last meeting. There's two projects that changed, and you will also see for the 22-23 year the wastewater is down to 67%, which is what we planned in our 10-year capital, so that we're concentrating on water and then switch over to the wastewater. Excuse me, Mayor. If I can take your attention to the second page there, you will see, which we picked up last time, the black butt filter media replacement. We had that scheduled for capital works this year. There was that emergency works that had to happen, so we've actually done that under operations this year. And there's a detail of that coming in the Standing Committee report. But so basically that's a 140,000 drop out of what we presented last time. And excuse me, if you go to the next page there, that's the yellow one. What I included was the Mount Wollongong Reservoir with that proposal that I put to council, with the possibility of having a new reservoir or a replacement of the other. So if it goes to a new reservoir, I propose that that's to access the Works for Queensland, that $2 million that was put aside. It possibly won't cost the $2 million. I believe it's going to, on the market at the moment, that's indicating about 1.2. That was that detailed proposal I put in the report. So if that was the case, if they actually put pen to paper and say, yeah, that's the right figure, well then obviously there'd be excess to be handed back to the Works for Queensland projects. They are the only changes as from what we presented last time, Mayor.
It's a good summary. Thanks very much, Acting General Manager. Mr. CEO.
Mayor, there's a question with regard, and it ties into the debt policy. So we've held the debt policy back from when that initial discussion, just to flag it that it's coming. So we've got the 800,000 on the second page for the Gordon Brook. Now, we have to do the Gordon Brook work, and we have to do that work next year, but we're still continuing to explore the options with the department. So instead of a 15 or whatever the cost may be, that it may actually be lesser. We will have a much better idea by Christmas. Now, there was the questions asked, if we draw down the loan, can we not take it? Yes, well, if we get approval, we cannot take it. But it's a question for council today, is just to give some guidance on where we go. We have enough cash reserves to carry the 800,000 in next year and deal with it, and then roll the loan into the following previous year. So I suppose it's council's appetite to borrow 800,000 next year, or do we push the borrowings out into the previous financial or the subsequent financial year? And I suppose it's a question today without either answer's correct and fine. But if we could hold off borrowing for next year, we get to Christmas, we will have to spend some of that, if not all of that 800,000 next year, no matter what happens. We almost do it like a flood damage. We carry the cost and then push the borrowings into the next financial year, and then reimburse our cash through that project, or offset. You know, we utilise, so we still utilise the borrowings for the purpose, which is the loan, but we carry the cost until we can bring it down. So I suppose council's appetite to borrow next year the 800,000, or do we hold another 12 months without borrowing and then roll that all into one big loan the subsequent financial year? Posed as a question, and would very much appreciate the feedback.
And thank you very much, Mr. CEO, for bringing that option forward. Something we hadn't considered as to whether we could whether we could pay it up front and then perhaps borrow later if we needed to. And because what you're saying is we're just not sure what the cost will ultimately be here in terms of as the project progresses.
The negotiations with the department, and I don't think it's unfair, Tim, to say, or Acting General Manager, that the support that and the cooperation, the relationships we have is excellent. We will have, at our understanding, we'll have a clear, the progress of the discussions at that point, we'll have a clear understanding of what's going to happen by Christmas. So we're probably, as far as the mechanics of actually doing things, so the works would be lined up for the second half of the financial year. If I've got any of this wrong, Acting General Manager, happy to be corrected, very, very happy to be corrected. But so the second half of the financial year, the project will really take its legs. And so, it's do we want to just hold till Christmas and then see? We won't have the option to, the COVID, from what I can understand, and I'm still seeking clarification for rates and a couple other bits and pieces, but having a look through the legislation the other day, and with the government lifting most of the COVID extensions, we wouldn't be able to approach, because it's not emergency borrowings, it's not. So this is our opportunity now through this budget process to borrow for next year. Any other borrowings would have to wait till the subsequent financial year.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. We might just get this one out for discussion, then we can have those conversations. So the recommendation here on this one, where are we, 6.3? Get my right page here. Oh, thanks, Bree. That the committee received the proposed 22-23 draft budget for the water and wastewater CapEx program and provide guidance for inclusion in the continued preparation of the full South Burnett Regional Council 22-23 annual budget as amended. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Shoemaker. Yeah, so we'll now go to speakers on that. Acting General Manager, Mr. CEO's raised the issue around timing of the delivery of the project.
Absolutely, Mayor, through you. So my position is that if we borrowed the 800,000 this year, am I going to use it all this year? That I don't believe I can, because we don't know the results of that detailed risk assessment yet, which is the that risk assessment is based on trying to downgrade the AFC upgrades. So if we can reduce that, I think we discussed this on Monday, if we can reduce that, then our actual potential costs in the upgrades is significantly lower. So that tender for those risk assessment on the dam has actually just been let. So we envisage that it'll take about 6 months to get some sort of result there.
So Mr. CEO is pretty well spot on in saying that we're probably not going to know until Christmas, December, January, as to what that assessment tells us in terms of the scope of the project. So council could, as Mr. CEO is indicating, give you the 6 months to do that risk assessment and then turn our minds to whether or not we want to borrow the money, depending on what the cost is likely to be after, early in the new calendar year, as even perhaps as part of a second quarter budget. Consideration, Mr. CEO?
Correct, Mayor, but the loan wouldn't, what are we, 22, 23, so the loan wouldn't be able to be accessed until the 23, 24 financial year. So once we give the window up to borrow and set it in the debt policy, and that's why the discussion today is whilst the debt policy was presented, the water capital program really has to be settled on first. Because it'll impact that. But yeah, certainly we could put all the legwork in place because it's a much larger loan in the 23-24 year. So you would bundle it all up together and rather than two loans, just do it all as one. It's certainly an option.
Thanks, Mr. CEO. Acting GM.
Yes, through you, Mayor. So what CEO was saying is correct. I think by the time we get the assessment, and I'm only saying 6 months is what I think it's going to be, we then have to then determine what scope, if any, is reduced and what the actual proposed works are going to be. So I believe in myself that we are better to self-fund it out of my restricted cash bucket and then know where we are at the end of the financial year to then be able to inform council as to what borrowings we need the next year. So we are proposing that there's 5 million in the next year and 6 million the year after. It may well be that we only need to borrow a couple of million if our anticipated results of this AFC upgrade come to fruition. We'll save a significant amount of money, Mayor.
Thank you, AGM. Councillors, your thoughts? Councillor Schumacher.
Pray that happens. I just had a question in relation to the funding model. If the project doesn't go ahead, as you say, so I just want confirmation, as you've just said, that if the project doesn't go ahead in its entirety, we're still likely to have to do something and there'll still be some level of borrowings to meet the needs of the department. So am I correct in my thinking? General Manager Lowe?
AGM.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Absolutely, Councillor. I'd have to bring it back to you, but in the 10-year program, we actually had the AFC upgrades, and then in the ensuing years after that, we had several more million of other works that have got to be done, which are outside the AFC upgrades. So you're absolutely correct. I think, but they've still got years ahead to do that, and it's the AFC upgrades that are quite literally killing council with our funding.
Yeah.
But yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And just my other question, just in relation to your capital program, Woodenbrook Dam survey for dredging. I see budget total there of 266,000. I just wanted to understand, with everything we know about Gordon-Brook Dam, why that survey is important and why we couldn't just go and dredge the dam without it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, AGM.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. Yeah, so the bathymetric survey is actually to need to confirm for the dam modelling. So we're actually, yeah, so it's the so that once we determine what silts are there, what can be removed, but it's a two-part reason for that. The bathymetric survey goes hand in hand to the AFC upgrades, and that's the problem. I've got to allow for that this year because we've got stepped points along the way to actually achieving the AFC upgrades in their timeframe that nominated for us. So that's why, we've got that this year and then the 800,000 for the others. So it's a stepped program, unfortunately.
Thank you, AGM.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. I think that survey and that longer-term view of dredging the dam, I know that's very important to the community. So, yeah, I guess thank you for the extra clarification. I know many have said there's quite a significant amount of sediment in the dam and they'd like to see it dredged at some point. So,
Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just wondering how it works. If we're taking the money to do this from restricted cash, how do we then top up our restricted cash with, because we can't top it up with the loan money if we do end up getting the loan. So how does that work and how do we get our money back into restricted cash for water, wastewater?
Mr CEO, can we reimburse our restricted cash from the loan borrowings in the following year?
It would be, we would utilise the loan funds for water and wastewater projects or water projects, and we would be utilising our cash. We wouldn't be utilising our cash going forward. So the loan would be transferred to other projects, water specific, and the equivalent amount would be offset in Mark speak.
You got that. Thanks, Councillor Potter. Thanks, Mr CEO. Further speakers on this one? AGM?
Yeah, through you, Mayor. One thing I was remiss in pointing out to council with the that will rule and reservoir, that $2 million, to bring that forward in and hopefully get a result there. The long-term result of that, if this comes about, Mayor, is the 25-26 budget year. We actually had that will rule and reservoir in there, and that was $4 million. So if this these tenders come to fruition, we're actually going to spend $1 to $2 million to save ourselves borrowing $4 million in 25-26.
Yeah, thanks very much, AGM. We know there's done some great work there in getting those options brought forward to us in previous meetings. Just in terms of that, how's our funded depreciation standing in terms of our cash, restricted cash pool for water and wastewater assets? If council chose to capex the 1.2 to 2 million, is that something that could be feasible? If we chose not to do it as a W4Q, but to do it as a funded depreciation item, in light of the fact that it's a new asset, it's not renewals though. So just an open question there, I suppose, AGM and for our accountants. Is there scope to do that?
Through you, Mayor, if I could defer to Kerry, Manager of Finance, I'm pretty sure we haven't got that much restricted cash to be able to do next year's capital projects as well as that as an addition.
Yeah, thank you, AGM. Manager of Finance.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. Yes, Tim is correct. There wouldn't quite be enough in that. Obviously, it will depend on where our operating surpluses and depreciation lands for this year to know how much might go into that restricted cash to add to the pool. We could have a bit more of a look at that just to see how much might be available based on Tim's current program that he's got there, and bring that back.
Thanks, Manager. Yeah, that'd be really great to have that information. I think when we do our workshop for Works for Queensland, General Manager O'May, to just understand where are we likely to land in terms of the cash pool for Triple W, so we can put that into context for allocation of funds. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, AGM.
Through you, Mayor. One thing I'd like to point out, and Manager of Finance can correct me, I believe that that $2 million is factored into the 18 models that we did last year. So that's for our long-term financials. So if we actually pull that 2 out, that affects our projects down how we were going to swap over in year 10 to wastewater. That would be detrimental to that, if you like, Mayor.
Yeah, thank you, AGM. And I suppose the other option for council would be to consider Did you want to wrap that up into borrowings as a we call it generational borrowing or something, as part of a generational borrowing if the advantage is going to be to the community moving forward? But anyway, it's a matter for council. Just keen to see that we get all the options at the table for councillors to consider. Thanks, Manager. Okay, we'll go to Councillor Shoemaker and then to Councillor Erkins. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Through you, just wanted to confirm, it was my understanding that Mount Warrulan New Reservoir was actually critical infrastructure in terms of water age, water quality, and actually meeting the needs of everybody on the water network at this point in time. And if we delay that project, then we can expect to have ongoing challenges in that regard. Am I right in my thinking? I'd just like a bit more clarification about the significance of the Mount Warrulan Reservoir, because, yes, I was of the impression that this actually was a game changer for Kingaroy's water network.
Thanks, AGM.
Through you, Mayor. Council may recall this was part of the first step in dealing with the issues of getting water from the west of Kingaroy to the east of Kingaroy. So definitely the source water, we need that extra capacity there. But in the long term, this was actually flagged for the 25-26 year. And it was part of an overall MIP assessment that was a result of that. So that you get the reservoir, then you can upgrade your pipe sizes, etc., to deal with the supply issues to the east of Kingaroy. Does that answer your question, Councillor?
Yes, thank you. I know that was an extensive capital works program, and if I refer back, I just wanted to confirm we actually had 3 options when we did our modelling in terms of our capital investment in water infrastructure following that MIP project, and it was a difficult decision. I think ideally we wanted to fix every problem in the water network would be a spend of 115 million over 10 years, and we took option 2, which was the 75 mil over 10 years. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to understand the significance of this project, because I was of the understanding that if we were to actually bring it forward, it would meet the needs of the current generation and current water users in the network that are underserviced at the moment because of this reservoir.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. It is a bit of both, Councillor. So it'll satisfy the shortfalls in the system that we've got now, or go. It's the first step in satisfying the shortfall in the system as we have now. You may recall one other step of the system. Once we get that reservoir, then up on, I'm not sure of the geography, but up on the east side, up on the hill, there's a further reservoir in future years. That increases the service capacity in that district. But you can't service that with additional reservoir until you actually have your source water. And that's the problem we got. So it's chicken and egg stuff.
Thank you, AGM. We'll go to Councillor Erkins shortly. Before we do, I think I certainly support the concept of doing the reservoir. I know when you brought that report forward to say we could potentially get it done for 1.2 million, we know it may not be that, but if it can, it's great. That was an exciting opportunity for us to jump on before the costs go through the roof into the future as well. So, thank you for that. Councillor Erkins, thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Mr Mayor. I'm just looking at the Nanango boards, and you know I'm not up to all the initials. Renewal of SB. And I'm sure WTF has a different meaning to what I was thinking.
Thank you, Councillor Erkins. The modern day acronyms, hey? WTF. Acting General Manager, can you give us all an overview as to what is happening there with that, is it a $490,000 project at Nanango? That'd be great, thank you.
Through you, Mayor. So these are part of our switchboard upgrades district-wide. With the legislation for arc flash is basically, council did an assessment, it would be probably about 3 years ago, and we fail to fail to satisfy the criteria for the arc flash. So arc flash is a big issue in commercial switchboards, whereby someone can basically get fried if they open the wrong door, and so this is all about all about power, councillor. Yes.
Can I also ask, sorry, you hadn't finished? There was that accident on the road. Was that one of the council bores that damaged?
Yes, absolutely. We've got pricings for replacement of that at this point in time.
Who pays for that?
That is a discussion that we've yet to have, councillor, but it's in train at the moment.
Yeah, we'll look forward to a report coming back on that once you've got all the information together. Thanks, AGM, in the future. Yeah. Okay, further speakers on this one? No? Shall we go to the vote? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all.
Mayor, with the debt policy, did we want to consider a change to the debt policy or leave it as it currently stands?
Yeah, sorry, Mr. CEO, that was remiss of me. Just a bit of a guidance back to the CEO. Are we comfortable with the CEO's proposal that we look to fund it up front and then we can obviously reallocate projects against the debt into the future? Councillor Potter, your thoughts?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do we need a motion on that one, or can we just?
What I was thinking is if the committee recommends to councils that the debt policy be amended to reflect borrowings for the 23-24 year. Yeah, and then we'll bring because it's got to come back, and so you'll see it, and that way it's not committing it to us, but that it'll let us, so we can draft it up and bring it back for discussion.
Councillor Potter, would you be prepared to move that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so Mr. If we can perhaps get that up on screen, the committee recommended to council that council consider the debt policy for, is it 23-24?
Consider the borrowings for 22-23. The debt policy borrowings for 22-23 financial year. You're right, Bree. No rush. 22-23. With a view to moving these borrowings to the 23-24 financial year. Today's just guidance, so we can go and do something with it. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. CEO, for bringing that matter forward. Councillor Potter, are you comfortable to move that as presented on screen? Thank you. So moved by Councillor Potter. Do we have a second? Councillor Shoemaker. Speakers, Councillor Potter first. Thank you.
No. Well, yes. I think this is a great idea. The fact that we can now that it's been, I've been informed that we can use that money for other wastewater and water and wastewater projects that we need to get done. I think this is probably the most sensible move we can make. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just probably a question for the CEO through you, just in relation to the next election and recognising this as a strategy for the next council. Just what mechanisms can be put in place to ensure that it does actually follow through in the way it's intended to?
Yeah.
Sorry, do you need more
Okay,
clarity? in what I'm
Thank you.
saying?
No,
So if we've earmarked, if we're taking restricted cash from the balance and saying, yes, we're not going to borrow funds, we're going to do this, and then a new term of council, does or does not know the history there, I'm just mindful of how we ensure that the intent is actually communicated or included in the policy, because potentially not refunding that borrowing could leave that 10-year capital program significantly short.
So Mr. CEO, if I can just lead you on this one. We'd adopt the debt policy for 23-24 in this term, though, wouldn't we? Yeah, could you just clarify that? Thank you.
Okay, so the debt policy spreads out over several years going forward. So council each year, probably, and just straight off the cuff without sounding too blunt, is you can't commit the next council to doing anything. We will have the 10-year financial plans, we'll have the 10-year capital programs, we'd have the adopted policies. But if a new council comes in and it has a mind to do something totally different, it can do that. So that's aspect of it. But as far as communicating it, it's the core corporate documents, the works, the capital program, the financial plan, the policy, because it will be enshrined year in, year out in the debt policy. That's why they come back for the annual review. So the 23-24, you will adopt, this current term will adopt that policy and commit to those borrowings anyway.
Okay.
And then that'll be, I suppose, as far as it's just we enshrine where we're going with that 10-year work, and if circumstances change or a new council wishes to go in a different direction, there'll be discussions we'd have to have at that point in time. But by the time this matter comes to head, it will be in this term in any which case.
Yeah, thank you for the clarification. I'm just thinking it's, that's important in terms of this decision because, I'm supportive of using our restricted funds for this purpose, but I do want to ensure that we replenish them. Fully respect, can't indicate what the next term does. That's not the point of my question. The point of my question was ensuring that we're not actually going to significantly impact our long-term capital program.
Further speakers? No? Go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. CEO.
Sorry, Mr.
Councillor Duff.
I just want to know with that, the Mount Baroolan and the 1.2 potentially getting it back to 1.2, do we need to have something come back to see if we can fund that out of depreciation or whether it can be done out of Works for Queensland?
Yeah, so thanks, Councillor.
A report back or?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. So I think I've flagged that with our Manager of Finance, there you are, Kerry. I've flagged that when we have the Works for Queensland workshop, we'll be presented with a number of options as to where we can fund those different projects from, particularly the Baroolan Reservoir. And so we probably have three options there. A, we can fund it out of Works for Queensland. B, we can seek to fund it out of cash at hand through funded depreciation, restricted cash. Or C, we could consider funding it out of borrowings. And then what are the implications for that if we were to look to borrow the money in the 22-23 years? So just confirming, Manager Finance, for Councillor Duff's question, we will have that presented as part of that Works for Queensland deliberation.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we'll do up some information so that you have that for that Works for Queensland discussion.
Thank you, Manager. You comfortable with that?
Yes, I am comfortable with it, but I can see through the report that we are going out to tender in any case, regardless, for that particular project.
Yes, that's correct. Council has resolved to do so. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to 6.4, trial of proprietary dust suppressant on Lenigan Road, Glen Devon at 8. Oh, sorry. Have I jumped the gun? 6.4. Yep, on it. Dust suppressant at page 18. Thank you, through you, Acting General Manager, for a report from you and Manager Searle. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. I think I might give my voice to the residents through Manager Searle, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is a continuation of discussion we had at the April Infrastructure Standing Committee meeting where we were talking about various dust suppressants. Our current service on our unsealed roads is a patrol grader once a year with a grader and roller, and we're looking at what options there are in particular to address any dust issues on our unsealed roads. So what I've got is a trial proposed for Lanigan's Road. Lanigan's Road's a little over 2 kilometres long, and the trial proposal is to essentially split the road into two. So the first kilometre from Burnett Highway would be the trial section, and then the remaining kilometre section we essentially use as a control section, and that's to look at the effectiveness of the product. So if I can just explain what the proposed trial is, and happy to take any feedback or suggestions. So we would seek to split the road up. We do the dust suppressant on one end and trial section on the other, and then after a 6-month period, we go back again and essentially do the reapplication on the basis that the dust suppressant is a temporary measure for dust, and reapplication is required. Back in 2016, we actually did a trial on Lanigan's Road using a product called Polychlor, and that was primarily for dust suppressant. And what we can find from that trial was that so 2016 is when we did it. Back in July 2018 is when we tended to get our dust complaints again. That's essentially the only information we can find from that particular trial. So we've made contact with a supplier, Polychlor, and they provided a recommended trial procedure and provided a quotation for the purchase of the material. Essentially, they're suggesting that they spray the product directly onto the road because the issue we're trying to address is dust suppression. So the post procedure would be a light tine, grade, water and compact of the road. And so what we're doing is correcting the formation surface defects, and then we spray on the dust suppressant. And then, so that's the trial section, and then essentially the control section, we do exactly the same process, but without the addition of the dust suppression. And then, as I said previously, in 6 months' time, we come back and do a reapplication. I've provided some cost estimates there. The initial application plus the trial section, and then coming back in 6 months' time to do the next reapplication. Just the final paragraph there. So in order to ensure that an adequate depth of pavement material exists and an appropriate formation can be constructed, it's suggested that a 50 mil thick top-up gravel resheet be added to the existing surface in conjunction with the initial application of dust suppressant. So to do the resheeting would be in the order of $30,000 per kilometre. So if we do the full length of Lanigan's, then that's $60,000. The combined gravel resheeting and initial application of dust suppressant would be accounted for as a capital project. The second dust suppressant application after the 6 months, we would account that as a maintenance cost. So that's essentially the proposal, and happy to take any comments or feedback.
Thank you very much, Manager, for the report. That's excellent. Okay, so we have recommendation that the report be noted. Council note this report. Do we have a mover? Yeah, Councillor Shoemaker, second, Councillor Henson. Speakers, Councillor Erkins. Thank you.
I just wondered, with our decision to go and look at roads, we wouldn't be doing anything until after we came back from that, would we?
Manager Searle, timing around this? Your thoughts? It would be in the next financial year, I'd imagine, and it would be subject to council adopting it in their capital budget.
That's correct.
And the
Mr. Mayor.
operational budget. Would that be correct? Yeah.
That's correct, yes.
So I think the answer is
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wouldn't be doing anything until after the
Yep.
budget's adopted.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one question in relation to patrol grade in the roller process, because I know we've talked plant and fleet and the request for additional rollers. Just wanted to confirm, patrol grading, you had said you'd be using a roller for this one, but it was my understanding with a patrol grade, we don't actually roll the surface. Have I got that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct. So grader water truck is our patrol grading. With this one, we would need to have a fairly tight surface at the recommendation of the supplier, and so we would need to bring in a roller.
Okay. I guess I'd just like to seek some guidance from the CEO, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually thinking about moving and or adjusting the motion that I've moved with the support of Councillor Henson to actually endorse this as a project for the capital project list.
Yeah, the mechanics of that, Mr. CEO, your thoughts today, or is it something will be brought up in the future?
Good question. It was presented as an information report for the day and then discussion. Councillor, the only thing is if we can, maybe if we note this or bring it back as part, manager sells final op and capital budgets next Friday will be before you. So I'm just wondering if that would be best just dealt with as part of that whole budget. Yeah, if that makes...
I absolutely hear what you're saying. I just don't want to lose it. So if we could note it as a project for inclusion in the draft capital budget and then actually ensure that comes back next Friday, I'd like to move that council note this report and include the cost estimates and take out the trial for dust suppressant on Lanigan Road, Glandevin, and include such in its draft capital works program for infrastructure, works, roads. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move that.
Mr. CEO, just before I accept that, I think I've already got a motion to that effect, have I not? That's been put through a recent committee meeting that goes to the capital works budget.
And that's and certainly not arguing the point with the councillor. That's where I was going before. This will come back next week, and so probably rather than just note the report, and we can bring it back. We can bring the same report back next week. Just clone it into the, because I'm absolutely certain it's in the draft budgets that are coming next week.
Yeah, no, it is, and I'm sure I moved a motion. Was it last budget meeting? Last week I moved a motion to exactly that effect, so that is on the books.
Yeah, I thought it was just to bring the report back. So
No, it was to bring it to the capital works
Okay.
program. Yeah.
I'm comfortable with that if you're not going to accept the motion. But yes, I absolutely want to ensure it's in the draft capital program.
Yes, yeah. Can we just confirm that for Councillor Manager Searle, that this will be in the capital program presented to Council for Works?
Yeah, that's correct. It's not currently in there, but certainly will be.
Yeah, thanks very much.
If it gives everyone comfort, council note the report and further discussion be held at the budget committee on whatever next week is 3rd of June. Yeah.
We just pop that in there, Bree.
If that council, and then that way, well, I've got the note here with what you've moved, and we'll ensure. As I said, I was absolutely certain had neglected my memory of the previous resolution, but it had been discussed about bringing it back. So information report today to flag it, that flagged the costs, and then discussion of the funding next week when we do the budget.
Okay, Councillor Schumacher, you're comfortable with that as the motion now?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to ensure we don't, often we make decisions and then we come back over them, and sometimes I just want to ensure this is actually on the table. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Henson, confirmed. Good, thank you. Councillor Duff, further speakers?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanting to know, with that gravel resheeting, is that only going to be on the piece that you're going to apply the dust suppressant?
Councillor, sorry if I can just interject. No, that is the full 2 kilometre section of the road.
And the question that I was going to ask was, is it going to include the table drains and tail drains, like are we going to form the road properly back up and do all of that as well as part of the gravel resheeting, or is that just to tip the gravel on?
Thank you, Manager.
Yeah, we would seek, if there's any defects in terms of drainage, to correct them, such as grading table drains and diversion drains whilst we're there.
So our process with a formation grade or a resheeting is typically to attend to the table and tail drains normally, I believe, where that's capital works. Would that be correct?
Oh, that's correct, Mr Mayor.
So Councillor Duff could be confident that if there were any table or tail drain defects that they'd be attended to when the new gravel goes down. Yep, okay, thank you. Yeah. Councillor Erkins.
Just to make note, that first section of Lanigan Road, that has a lot of water issues. A lot of water runs across that road during wet seasons. That's just the way the water runs. So that'll take some work, and it's a lot different at the start of that road than it is another kilometre up the road. So, you know, where I understand it's a trial, you're comparing one section to the other, but on that road you're actually going to be comparing apples with oranges because the road does change a fair bit just on that road. I just wasn't sure if you're aware.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. It'll certainly be interesting to see the impact of the water flow has, but we'd leave it with you, Manager Searle, to ensure that the drainage is appropriately attended to, so that that doesn't give us a false understanding of the effectiveness of the trial. Yeah.
That's through you, Mr Mayor. Just on the, if there's significant changes to the drainage that's required, then that wouldn't be included in the trial. That we would look at that separately. But typically, the likes of your table drains and your diversion drains, etc., is part of your normal formation grading.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm certainly sure that my resolution included the drainage works. So I think when we get the capital budget come back, it was to include drainage works as well as, it did, didn't it, Councillor Potter? It was to include drainage works required on that road, Manager. So perhaps if we could revisit that resolution from last week, just to confirm that when the capital budget comes forward, it includes capital upgrade to the drainage system on Lanigan's Road. Thank you. Yeah. Back to Councillor Erkins.
Sorry, just to confirm, Bart, that section of road where when you go in, there's a high set house, in heavy rain, and I haven't actually been there while this heavy rain is this time, but in the past, all under that house, right out onto that road, more than just, I don't think that what you're normally talking with the, you know, that would not handle what we're talking about with, you know, the normal rain. So I just didn't know if you're aware of how bad that actually is, but it does get very bad. It's not something I don't believe. And I mean, we may not get that heavy rain, but they are predicting more rain, and I do know that is like a river goes across there. Just to make sure everyone's aware.
Acting General Manager, what are your thoughts on that? Should we perhaps, have you done some work? Would you like to do some more work around investigating the water flow there?
Mr Mayor, yes. So the intent here is to look at dust issues primarily, but if there's some significant drainage issues that need looking at, then I think we'll go away and take that on notice and look at that in a bit more depth and come back with the proposal.
Thank you, Manager. Thank you, Councillor, for bringing that to our attention. Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a question on notice, I guess. I can see certainly a history of dust complaints and have followed this one. I just wanted to understand how many residential properties were actually located along the section of road that we're proposing to seal here with the dust suppressant, and how many properties on the other end, if there are any residential houses. It's been some time since I've actually been on Glendevon Road, so just wanted to check, Lanigan Road. If that can come back with the report, or if you know now, I'd just like that information. I will go for a look.
Thank you, Manager.
Through you, Mr Mayor, the exact number I'm uncertain. It's probably in the order of half a dozen or so, but the intent of the trial section was to pick up the majority of houses in that first kilometre section. On the eastern section, it seems to be quite sparse and probably not so many concerns with dust.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'm just thinking about the monitoring of this project. So how will we know we're successful? If there are people living in the vicinity, of course, who can give us that feedback directly, I think that that's really important. I guess in terms of informing the way council does things into the future, I think any feedback, whether in my previous experience, I know I've had people keep dust logs or do dust deposition gauges on properties for that heavier dust that you'll see from situations like driving up a road. So I guess I just wanted to understand with this project what the process will be for measurement and determining if we have actually made a difference.
Thank you, Manager. The technical, I suppose, approach to monitoring the effectiveness of the trial.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Mayor. So we don't have any formal dust monitoring equipment that's proposed for the trial. If council wanted to proceed down that path, then happy to look at costs, etc. Typically, it's perhaps an anecdotal, particularly from the customers along that road, to seek that feedback. But there's but certainly periodic inspections, and at the end of the 12-month period, which is essentially what we're looking at, there's an opportunity to provide perhaps a report on how it went. And I get the feeling that that's probably the downfall of that initial test, that trial that was done in 2016 as well. We probably struggled to find out whether it was successful or not. But fundamentally, it's a temporary measure. It's logical to expect that dust complaints would continue once we stop the dust suppression project.
I guess just a supplementary question, Mr. Mayor. Just looking at this and looking at the dust seal register, and I guess the intent of perhaps doing this to some of these areas that are impacted by dust, I really do think we need to quantify the trial. And I'd be interested if we could have a conversation with our lab, if it might be something that they might be able to help us with. A dust deposition gauge is not fancy. It's literally a bottle that sits in a stand. And if you put one, you have to, of course, get permission to put it on somebody's property or alike, or we could hide it somewhere in the area. I've done it before. And basically once a month you have to collect that bottle and have it examined by a lab. It's not an overly expensive process. I know I've had extensive experience with it in the past, and it really does quantify if there is a difference in the environment because of this project. I just think we're talking about, potentially an extra $2,300 in the future for areas per kilometre, for areas of significant dust. And if we could demonstrate to our community that because of that suppressant, it has made a difference or not, I think that's really, really important. So I'd certainly welcome if it could be taken away, maybe conversation with our lab, if they've got connections in the industry or someone who could do that, just a dust deposition gauge, and it will demonstrate clearly, regardless of whether it rains or not, it does collect all the dust in the area, and it will demonstrate clearly what's coming off that road and potentially impacting residential properties and what's not. So I think that would be a really important part of this trial, really quantifying the dust in the environment.
Yeah, thank you, Manager. If you could perhaps note that and come back with a report when we have that discussion at our future meeting. Acting General Manager.
Yeah, through you, Mayor. I think that's a great idea, Councillor, and I'd be thinking that for the amount of residents that are up there on that trial area, we could quite easily approach them with feedback forms so that we get them every 3 or 6 months for them to provide feedback on their observations on the performance of it as well. Because if the wind's blowing the other way, well, then it might not get in your dust monitor. So to speak.
That's a good point. Yeah, thanks, Acting General Manager. Councillor Duff.
Mr. Mayor, I was just going to ask the similar question about how we were going to communicate with the residents of Lanigan's Road, the ones that aren't in it, the ones that are in it, and how we're going to get that feedback in a formal process. So I think it should be done formally.
Thank you, councillors. Okay, shall we go to the vote on this one? Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. I'll now move that we break for morning tea. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Hanshin. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. Okay, I'll now move that we resume the meeting. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Shoemaker. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. 6.5, interest on overdue rates. It's recommended, committee recommend to council that pursuant to section 133 of the Local Government Regulation 2012, compound interest on daily rests at the rate of 8.17% per annum to be charged on all overdue rates or charges. Council determine that rates or charges will be considered as overdue for the charging of interest if they remain unpaid after 30 days from the due date of the relevant rate notice. Do we have a mover? Councillor Hanshin, seconder? Councillor Potter, thank you. Councillor Hanshin and Councillor Potter. Now, I'm just going to ask Mr CEO just to give us some little bit of background on section 133 and how the actual rate is regulated by the local government regulation there. Thank you, Mr CEO.
Thanks, Mayor. And here's one we prepared earlier. Section 133 of the Local Government Regulations and 125 of Brisbane, okay, Brisbane doesn't impact us, prescribes the way the maximum interest rates on overdue rates and charges is calculated. For overdue rates and charges, the bank bill yield rate, 3-month bank accepted bills average at the month of March in each year, is used to calculate the maximum rate of interest to apply for the following year. Actually, local governments are required to set the actual interest rate to be charged on overdue rates each year. So that's a yearly setting up to the maximum interest rate set by the local government regulation. This is done by resolution as part of the annual budget process. The bank bill yield rate as of March 22, published by the RBA, was 0.17%. So the maximum rate for 22-23 year will be 8.17.
Thank you very much, Mr CEO. Okay, speakers, Councillor Erkins.
I've got a fair bit of concern with this, and I don't understand it completely, but I just know that 8.7% is a lot of interest, and if someone can't pay their rates, they're obviously struggling. So for us to put an interest rate of 8.7, I understand they can go to the bank and get that money, but a lot of times the reason they don't go to the bank is they're probably overcommitted and the bank aren't going to lend them money. So really, as I said, I don't know the whole process, and you might be able to enlighten me, but I do deal with a lot of people who have overdue rates. It puts an enormous amount of pressure, and some of these people they're just never going to be able to get those rates paid, and they're going to have to sell their properties because of the interest rate. They can't come to an agreement that's going to allow them to get them paid.
Thank you, Councillor. So just confirm it is 8.17%, and we'll seek the perspective of other councillors. Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the interest, there needs to be some sort of interest rate on it. And, you know, if Councillor Erkins wants to keep it at 8%, I don't have an issue with that. But what they need to realise is we do have a hardship policy. We will sit down and work with anybody who is in financial hardship. So the staff are very, very good in that space. And I think that maybe that needs to be out there more. If Councillor Erkins is saying that she's dealt with people who are struggling, then they need to come to council and they need to talk to us so we can help them.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Hanshin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just in relation to that, there's been a lot of work Councillor Erkins done in this space with rates and rates in arrears, which has cost council a huge amount of money in previous years, and the policy that's been set out to try and help people with, as Councillor Potter has just alluded to, in paying their rates. There's rates there, it's incentive there, of course, for them as well to try and pay them early. That comes to a huge figure, these rates in arrears, and council's worked hard to try and accommodate those people. And yeah, there's a fine line and it's been drawn in the sand, but yeah, as tough as it may seem, I understand, but a supporter certainly of this motion, yeah.
Further speakers? Other perspectives? Councillor Schumacher.
Thank you, Mayor Otto. I've only just done a really quick Google search. I've found that Western Downs is charging 8.53%, Scenic Rim is charging 8.53%, and Toowoomba has flatlined at 8%. I guess my question was, what's our current interest rate, Mr. CEO?
Oop.
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Through Mayor, through your chair, Mayor. Great question. 8.53 is last year's set maximum rate as set by the department. So it's actually as late as 2018, and it was the flat line 11%. It's been that for I won't say forever, but for a long time. Then the methodology in the regulations were changed. So 1920 it was 9.83. 2021 financial year was 8.53. Actually, last year with interest rates, it dropped to 8.03 as set by the department. So the Western Downs ones at 8.53 probably should have moved it back. So whether it's just the old rate, yeah. And then this year, because again, at the bank bill rate, it's moved to 8.17. To the mechanics of it, and without sounding, is that all councils across the state have problems with overdue rates, and part of the thinking behind it over the years is that councils shouldn't be a bank, and quite often rates are used as part. It becomes not quite often actually. That's unfair, but the rate is a charge on the land, and there it is. And so the majority of councils, there will be the odd exception, accept the regulation rate and stick to that. And so, yeah, so if that helps, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Councillor.
I just wanted to confirm with the CEO or finance team, it's my understanding since this term of council, I think we started, I just want to confirm, I want to say 12%. I don't think that's right with overdue rates, and I think we've brought that back down considerably. I just want to confirm what's the current percentage of ratepayers in our region with overdue rates? Kelly?
Manager Finance, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. From memory, our end of April was roughly about that, just over 9% we were down to.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I'm sitting on the fence. Like, I do absolutely agree that when you're behind in your bills, it's really hard to catch up on your bills. But I also agree that, what we find if you're not paying your rates is they become so out of control. Nobody wants to sell up anybody's property or try to recoup that funding, and the only way we can do that is through selling your property at the end of the day if you're not paying the bill. My final question is, if you are really like difficult circumstances that often come through the council chamber, council will either waive or not charge interest. We have done that in exceptional circumstances in the past. Am I correct in my thinking and understanding of that, if it's recommended by the staff?
Thank you, Manager Finance.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do obviously have both the hardship policy where council can, based on that hardship, can do a number of things so that there is, the ceasing of interest for a certain period of time, deferring payments, that sort of thing. Very exceptional circumstances would cause council in the past to have waived. But yes, there are options out there. We also, if ratepayers are on an approved payment plan, then interest doesn't accrue if they're adhering to those. So, yeah.
Thank you, Manager. Can I just ask one question, Manager? Do we know from our 21-22 budget, what is our budgeted interest revenue on overdue rates, and what are we likely to collect in interest revenue in the current financial year on overdue rates.
I'll just look that up for you now, Mr Mayor.
Yeah, thank you. Just while you're doing that, we'll go back to Councillor Duff.
I just was reading section 567 of our hardship policy, and it says writing off accrued interest. Council may write off accrued interest and costs on rates and charges payable by a person where, if it's an opinion that payment of accrued interest would cause the person hardship. So I guess through you, Mr Mayor, to answer Councillor Erkin's question, whether we can look more at the hardship policy and the guidelines and the eligibility to be on that policy. Maybe it's too tough to get on there to be part of that concessions, but that's where we can look after those people.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Erkins.
Can I just ask, if somebody gets behind in their rates and they haven't paid them, what's the first contact they get? Do they get something from council offering them their options, or do they get a letter from the debt collection agency? Because I've heard people come to me, the first thing they get is from the debt collector.
Manager Finance.
Through you, Mr Mayor. So the process that we currently have in place is that basically 14 days after the end of the due date, a reminder letter goes out to those ratepayers that haven't paid. There then generally is a second reminder notice that also goes out before it then goes through to our debt collectors, and then they will make contact with a demand letter and then basically go from there through the process.
One letter after 14 days, then a second letter, and then after the second letter we then go to the debt collectors, just confirming.
Yes, correct. That's the current process, yes.
Thank you, Manager Finance. We'll stay with you, Councillor Erkins. Thank you.
So when they, through you, Mr Mayor. So when they get that overdue, telling them that they're overdue, it would be nice to think that there was something in that to say, if you are facing financial hardship, you do have, you can come and speak to council about it, because a lot of people are, they don't know that that's available to them, especially if you are in a state of having trouble with your finances. A lot of those people aren't thinking rationally. We speak a lot about mental health and looking after mental health. And I'm not saying that we should let them offer their rates, but, surely it would be nice to think that as a council that we say to them, come and speak to council if you're having financial hardships, and then, the departments can go through and make sure that they're not someone who's just out bad money managers, or even they can suggest to them that they talk to a financial counsellor or something, because, I do think that while it is only 9%, I'll bet that in that 9% there's a lot of people that are, they want to pay their rates, they understand, but they just financially strapped for cash.
Manager Finance, our process in terms of informing overdue ratepayers as to their options with council.
Yes, through you, Mr Mayor. The rates department if we do have customers that contact us advising, they are finding it difficult to pay, they can't adhere or come up with the amount that, would be an approved payment plan, we do always offer them with, that we have the financial hardship. We also have a range of, I think it's like a little flyer that advises of the various departments and businesses around the area that do assist with, your financial counselling and financial assistance. So we do try and provide all those options for them to make sure that, they try and go down that path to help.
Thank you, Manager Finance. We'll stay with you, Councillor Erkins.
Yeah, I see that, and I understand that. However, that's after they make the contact with you. And, the thing is that people who are quite often in financial hardships, they really probably bury their head in the sand and they don't want to face it. So maybe if the contact came from council to start with saying, if you have an issue with this, before they get that letter from the debt collector, they've already had, I understand they've had the overdue, but, people who have, if you've ever spoken to someone who's having financial difficulties, quite often all those letters with the envelopes, they don't even open them because, you know, it's crowding in on them. So it would be nice to think that we offered, you know, straight off. So
Manager Finance, would that process that you spoke of be set down in a policy or a procedure that could come back to council for consideration?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we have the rate collection policy and we also have the financial hardship policy. So I believe the financial hardship policy will come back to council at some point shortly. We're also having a relook at the rate collection policy over the next 6 months as well, just to determine, you know, if anything needs to change in that. So that will come back as well at some point.
Councillor Eakins, would you be comfortable if we were to have a report brought back to the Finance and Corporate Standing Committee meeting, perhaps in July, once we've got the budget bedded down, in relation to the rates collection and also the financial hardship policy, so that we can have that conversation around what you're suggesting?
definitely. And I don't want to take away from the fact that I understand that people need to pay their rates. I'm not arguing that at all, but it's just for us to have a little compassion maybe on how we collect them and making sure that they know of the options available to them. But yes, I'd be very happy with that.
Thank you. Perhaps we'll duly note that and work to do that if we could, Mr. CEO. Thank you. Manager Finance, sorry, we sort of tied you up there, but any idea as to what sort of revenue we'll collect from interest charges?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I've just had a bit of a look. So we have roughly in our budget 160,000 for the year. The end of April, we were up to 132,000.
Thank you. I'm just wanting to put that in the context for the committee in terms of the revenue that we collect, because remember against that, as any business has, or any agency such as ours, there are costs associated with that. So we do, for example, have a full-time staff member dedicated to debtor recovery. And we obviously, it does also take up the time of our manager of finance, and our general manager as well, I know, gets involved from time to time in reviewing and overseeing the recovery of outstanding rates. So I would have thought that the 160,000, there's probably not much surplus in that by the time we pay for a full-time staff member and our manager and general manager's involvement in the process. Mr. CEO, your thoughts?
Thanks, Mayor. And the other aspects, and fully support your comments, Mayor, and the other aspects is when we do go to sale of land, at best we recover our costs and then surpluses are distributed out. At worst, and quite often, we carry the liability for the losses. So as this council knows, in its first year, we carried those liabilities and had to absorb them, as well as even the advertising process. Because we must advertise in the Courier Mail, the most recent advert of the properties in the process was about $9,000. Now we have to advertise in a statewide newspaper, so there's extensive costs in this process for recovery.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Well, thank you, committee, for a good discussion on this. I think we'll now look to wrap up and go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all.
Mayor, if I may, so we'll resolve that a report comes back to the July Exec and Finance Committee. That was the request.
Yes, please. Thank you. Okay, 6.6 is the Buildings and Facilities Proposed CapEx Program for 22-23. It is at 21 now. I just want to make everyone aware that Manager Peterson has been delayed at a community, at a project she's working on out at Wandai. So we're going to have General Manager O'May run us through that, and we should all have in front of us the proposed capital projects list. So we'll go to you. Thank you, General Manager O'May.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the summarised facilities capital project that's proposed for next year. So this was what we ran through the other day in the workshop. So I think not sure if it's probably small enough we can run through quickly, just line by line, which the projects. So the first one is the Kingaroy Customer Service Centre. So this is reconfiguring the customer service centre out here. So we had the temporary screens put in for COVID. So it was basically putting the new screens in, new countertop. But the big issue with this is removing the internal. It is at a raised platform. We've had a number of workplace health and safety incidents where we've had staff fall down the steps and injure themselves. So the screens and countertop are just probably more ancillary to the works. We've got to try to remove the different level platforms that we've got up there. So we've got a higher platform that work down to service the person with disability, and then the back office. So that's where the big cost comes, is actually reconfiguration of that area. We're trying to put that in this budget now while we've got customer service relocated out of the office. So before we bring them back in, we can actually do that work now rather than have to relocate them out again at some stage in the future. So that's that project. The regional, again, sticking with the administration centre, so this is upgrading the CCTV installations in our satellite offices in Anango Mergan. So this is replacing what the equipment we have there is sort of end of life. This is bringing it in line with the newest CCTV we have started to install, so we can get it all into one system. So that's upgrading the existing stuff. So that's a renewal of the work that is in those offices. The next one is in the depot. So again, just stick with CCTV, and it is good. Like if we can do these projects together rather than you can lump them together with a tender. So while we've got CCT contractors on board, so this is installing CCTV at 2 of the depots, and Anango and Mergan, and we have had issues with theft of gear from the depot. So these two are probably. You don't have staff all around all the time. We have got CCTV. We have done Kingaroy and Wondai, so they've been upgraded. So this is for those 2 depots. The Kingaroy depot car parking, again, this is issue we do have with just providing car parks down there. And we have had a number of, this has been identified through workplace health and safety audits a number of times as a real risk down around Kingaroy, and this is like the staff parking. And if you go down that little street into the depot, it's always a nightmare, just with the number of cars and vehicles coming. So it's trying again get some of those vehicles away. So all of those projects are, so they're funded by council depreciation. We've got for those. The next project's Mondua Hall restumping. So this is a Works of Queensland project, and one that council has already got a council resolution on the books to do that. That one's sort of underway, so that's funded by the Works of Queensland project. Heritage Museum, so this is the replacing the tourism road sign out at Boondooma Homestead. It's a project that's been on the books for a while, and negotiating with Main Roads takes forever, but yeah, we finally sort of can see light at the end of the tunnel. It is large sign. There's a lot of engineering that goes into that. But the repairs to the stone store. So we've had the heritage assessment out there. We've done the testing on the mortar, and so that's upgrades or repairs at the homestead there. And then the Anango Vic Centre, so that was just upgrading the foyer area or the forecourt area at the VIC there, sort of trying to make that a more attractive area and probably reduce the maintenance there. So install some artificial turf, we get some pots, and there's some shading there. So just make that a more accessible area for the volunteers and for visitors to sort of spill out into that area. And it is one we have fallen down with our maintenance out there, so we do hope to make it a lot easier to maintain. Next one's the PCYC bathroom renovation. So this is at the Mergan PCYC. Again, this is one that had been identified under the Works for Queensland project. This is quite a major project with the bathrooms there. I'm not sure when we did the inspection out there whether you saw whether we had the pipes, which were basically cancerous in behind the walls and not in a good shape. So that's a project that really does need doing, a very well utilised facility. Swimming pool. So the first project is the Bbrf project, a Wondai swimming pool refurbishment. So that's with the installation of the little splash park and repairs around there. So it's a 50-50 funded one. So we had we've just shown that grant funding there across and half council depreciation. So that's the project that's sort of started this year, but we'll be continuing into next year. The Wondai swimming pool. So this is, I think Manager Leanne talked about this at the workshop, that we really do the expansion joints and pump yeah, we just need to get this one completed. It's just due for maintenance, and so we really do need to get that one. Make sure we are complying with our pool ones. I'll come back to the Kingaroy Learn to Swim one. We haven't got a budget against this. I think Leanne talked about this one with the Learn to Swim pool. We're patching it up and keeping it going at the moment, but it is getting really close to end of life. So we are preparing a report to come back to council. We don't want to go and fully replace it at the moment, given we're doing all of the planning works around replacing that facility there. So we're just really looking at, but we may need to bring a report back to just do some, whether it's putting a bladder in or some new fiberglassing, just to keep it going for the next couple of years until we can get a decent grant and replace that properly. So we just haven't got that identified, but we did talk about it, I think, through the workshop, that was one just to look at, and we are bringing a report back, so that's why there's no money against that one. The heat blankets at the pool there, so they aren't working this year, so that they are, beyond end of life, I suppose, because they're not using them anymore. So we had a number of complaints this year that we haven't been able to have those heat blankets on the pool. And the final one is to keep going with the work that we are doing at the Memorial Park, and that master planning is to actually get construction drawings done that can actually, we can progress that project, and we are going to need those to eventually replace that pool, and as part of the grant applications. That's probably the quick summary through there. You can see from the depreciation figure at the bottom there, we've got 1.2 in depreciation, 708,000 in grant funding. Talking about the depreciation, so that's probably about half. I don't know if you've got the figure for the depreciation for the buildings asset class is somewhere around the 2-point-something million. We normally unfund, we have in previous years sort of unfunded at $1.1 million. So looking at 2.6, that could even be closer to 3 million with the revaluations depreciation in this asset class. I'm not sure where, but we used to unfund that 1.16, which was the change in valuation when we did that last comprehensive reval. So we are, just while I was just mentioning that, because that's that figure that, depending on where the surplus ends up and where we decide what we're going to unfund, we are certainly haven't fully, haven't put a project together that's got full funding of depreciation, just recognising that we won't be able to fully fund depreciation in all of our asset classes. So this is probably the priority projects that we put forward at this stage. So, and I think the only one in the Works of Queensland one, the Monja Hall one, already had a resolution, but I think the PCYC one is still part of those ones, just to be confirmed as part of the Works of Queensland renovation. So I'll leave it there and hand it over to councillors. Questions?
Yeah, thanks very
Thanks,
much,
Mr.
General
Mayor.
Manager. Okay, so we have the recommendation that the committee receive the proposed 22-23 draft budget for the Buildings and Facilities CapEx program and provide guidance for inclusion in the continued preparation of the full South Bennett Regional Council 22-23 annual budget as amended. Do we have a mover? Councillor Potter, seconded Councillor Duff. Speakers? Councillor Shoemaker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. Just with the Kingaroy swimming pool and the work that's sort of underway there. Certainly had feedback. I actually did go after the workshop and have a conversation with a few different people that I know do get up early to use that pool in the mornings in relation to the heat blankets. I am a little bit concerned that the comments that we could spend the $95,000 to decrease the actual, it may keep the pool warmer, and I know that the people running the pool do receive complaints about the fact that there are no heat blankets, so we're not keeping that heat in during the season. My question, and this Learn to Swim pool, I know that's critical because there's over 1,000 kids every week doing Learn to Swim classes in Kingaroy. I've also had significant feedback around the bathrooms. And as a mother myself who's taken her children there, and the fact that if you were just probably Councillor Henshin's height, you could possibly see over the tops of the bathroom doors in the bathrooms. And with the work that's happening with the pool, yeah, I'm not your. I envy your height, Mr. Councillor Henshin. I'm actually wondering if we removed that and brought it back with the work that's happening as a quarterly, with the whole range of the issues that have been identified with the pool, just so that we can make sure the funding that we're putting in there is relevant. It's not going to be. My concern about the heat blankets was that if we buy them, there's no guarantees that they'll actually be able to be used with the new pool. And there's big question marks over the pool, future development, how that would happen, whether it in my mind would need to be staged and attract significant grant funding. So I guess I'm General Manager O'May. Just with all of the information we know about the pool, can we bring back like a list of the priority items around that pool? I'm just not comfortable putting funds in there just at this point, and I'm just mindful there are a number of issues there, and I think council needs to have a much bigger conversation about the Kingaroy pool and its future strategy for such. I'd welcome your feedback on that.
Thank you, General Manager O'May.
Through the chair, we could certainly include that in with the children's pool, like the learn to swim pool, and if we bring it back as a report, certainly could add in at a future amended budget. We could actually add those things in. But it's really at council's discretion if you wanted to put those on hold and bring them back at a future date. The concern would be, I suppose, you don't want to reallocate all of your funding and then you're dipping into capital expenditure. But the heat blankets could certainly be brought back as part of consideration with that issues at the pool. We probably are mindful, given that we are going to need significant renovation works there, and that's what the whole project is, that we are not spending funds that will be only for a year or two and then be obsolete. So it is part of that is part of our consideration.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just with that, I feel like we've been patching it up for a number of years. We all know that it's one of our highest used pools in the region, and it's significantly broken. I guess just for the season ahead, just would like to really take a look at the bigger picture in terms of what are those priority things that are needed, if we're all agreeing that, yes, it's a project in the pipeline, but no, we can't do it right now. I guess I'd just like us to really consider what are the things that are really needed at that pool for the next 12 months, because there are significant issues there that I think if we could even, just have a report of some of those things. I'm in agreement that something needs to be spent there. It's severely broken. I just want to make sure that we're spending our money wisely there, as you've said. The other item I just wanted to ask some questions about was just with the customer service centre. I just wanted to understand, with removing that platform, I certainly appreciate the workplace health and safety and not diminishing that. We need to provide a safe workplace. I just wanted to understand, have there been other options explored in terms of mitigating that risk? I've had a look at it myself. I can see how you could easily Kamagutsa on those steps. Have we looked at options like putting in a door, for instance, so people don't actually automatically leap out the customer service centre, or have there been other controls investigated? Are we sure that this is the very best way of fixing the problem?
Mr. CEO, thank you.
So, thanks, Councillor. Yeah, certainly. Short answer is yes. We've gone through the several. So we've gone through the whole risk matrix of minimising, and part of the cost is once the floor comes out, the counter benches are too high. So for all access for the little bench around the side and everything else. So long answer short is yes, it's just gone through. There is, if we're to mitigate and deal with the risk, the floor code's got to come out, and we're just down to that point now.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Okay, Councillor Okins.
Probably on the pool, I'm really happy to see that a bladder would go in and for the Learn to Swim. Can you tell me how big the Learn to Swim school pool is?
Thank you, General Manager.
Kirsty might be better able to answer this one better. It's about,
No, length.
it's about,
How long is it?
10 metres. 10 metres by
10 metres,
Okay.
Councillor.
5
Do
or
they
something,
use-
4 or 5, yeah.
Do they use that for hydrotherapy?
Yep.
Do they use it for hydrotherapy?
No, I think it's,
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, limited.
okay.
So the heat blankets are for the big pool? So what sort of, how long does that extend? Does that extend the use? No. Does it extend the usage the season? Or does it just make the water warmer for them to swim in?
General Manager.
Yeah, it does. Oh, it does cover. It doesn't necessarily extend the season. It just does make it, I suppose, better for patrons, and you get that increased usage because it is easier to. It would help extend the season, but generally they're fixed. They do help with sort of some of your water usage, your chemical usage, and operations. And I'm certainly not an expert. Wouldn't be able to say what savings you do have by having the blankets on, but you do be able to retain chemicals and water and those sort of things. And certainly with your savings on the heating, which you're losing and reheating your water as much. But there are other benefits than just keeping it warm. There are operational benefits of having them.
I was under the impression that the warmer the water, the more chemicals, because of the build-up, they grow more bugs in the hot water, so they need more chemicals in the warmer water. But anyway, that wasn't the what's the name? How many people actually use it in the morning for those early? Do you know?
Yeah. Can we just bring this back?
Okay.
General Manager.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, any further specific questions in relation to the budget, to these items here? Keeping in mind that if you do have questions around this, we are going to. This is just a recommendation, so feel free to email them through to the General Manager in advance of the CapEx budget deliberations. Mr. CEO.
Thanks, Mayor. So we, with the report, we'll note that there's a report to come back for the priority items of the pool. So is that's where we want to go?
Yes, please.
So
Thank
do
you,
we
Mr.
want to
CEO.
drop the memorial pool 95,000 out and include? No, you want to leave that in there. That's what I was just trying to clarify what you're asking.
Yeah, so if we can have a report come back in advance of the capital expenditure budget. Thanks, Mr. CEO, in relation to that. General Manager, the other question I had, we spoke about assigning capital funds to renewals on buildings across so that we could actually reduce our repairs and maintenance budget in the OPEX for facilities. Is that going to be in this budget?
Yeah, so that as part of the Works for Queensland budget, we have allocated funds, but that's for operational maintenance. So it's basically an idea that we can use Works for Queensland for operational maintenance rather than just council's funding. So we have got that included in the operational budget, but that's not shown in the CapEx.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, that's fine. We've accounted for that. Anything further? We'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. The final item on the agenda today is questions on notice. Now on page 23, committee, you'll find the responses to the questions on notice there, 1 through to 5. I'll just ask the committee to take some time to have a look at those responses, and then we'll go to the motion to confirm that they are accepted. Okay, so questions? Councillor Shoemaker.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just with question 3, to review street lighting to potentially use renewable sources. I've actually been thinking about that in terms of council's, I know we've added that into our operational plan. I actually think it would be really beneficial for every department to give some consideration to that, in terms of what the opportunities might be to adapt their operations to include solar, particularly the buildings or facilities that are high energy users. So my thinking would be, you wouldn't do this for every facility, but I was thinking our really energy hungry facilities, things where we're using pumps and things in the water area, or facilities like the libraries or certainly our office buildings, whether we can incorporate in our op plan some sort of audit or review of those high energy intensive buildings and investigation into the costs of actually putting solar onto those facilities. I think it would be really beneficial. I guess my bigger picture thinking is around trying to build a strategy for council so that in the next budget, or when funding opportunities may become available, we're actually ready to submit some applications, or potentially in our next budget allocate capital funds to projects like this, which could have a giant return on investment and deliver giant savings for the council.
Mr. CEO.
Sorry. Thanks, councillor. It's been a great morning. Here's one we prepared earlier. The petition from last year with the climate crisis, which is probably not necessarily language we would use, but certainly in the theme of, we've been trying to think about how to close it out because we're doing a whole range of things. Procurement started to reach out through we do the energy audit, the reverse audit through the energy systems, periodically, which has brought back some of our energy costs, and certainly with the announcements this last week, oh my dooly, 18% over the last 12-month period in wholesale energy prices. So whilst it's in its infancy and there will be further information to come back, what's our offsets in energy, what solar, so who can provide solar energy, so that will be the big ticket process through a procurement process and doing those reverse energy audits. But to look at how we close out that petition or that presentation from last year, we're doing a raft of things, and even in your portfolio report the other day, you noted all the different things. So we're doing a whole raft of things across the organisation. Without having it in front of me, and we actually had a bit of a think tank again this last week. So whether it sits in I say mine, but in the Office of CEO, the Environmental Sustainability Policy, which is EN1 and Section 4, if I've got my numbers right. So that will be folded in as our priority for next year. Following on from that, even with the offsets through the power, that will be rolling on, so they'll take a longer period of time, and so that's stretching it out. So probably over the next 2-3 years, sustainability policy and identification of initiatives next year, practical implementation in 23-24 of certain aspects of it by the time we go through reverse tender processes. So, yeah, so if you're comfortable, just if you want to note something, but certainly as part of, and which I said about the operational plan workshop will be on the 6th of June, that bit will be folded in as an addendum addition to the operational plan items so that we can hook into that. That'll give me a degree of comfort of closing out the petition because we are doing things, but they're all little bits and they're ad hoc. And so just being able to write back to the petitioners and saying, okay, we've got a strategy, this is the process, this will be the sustainability policy that we'll be implementing next year, and love to keep you informed and love your work and happy to continue the discussions.
Thank you, Mr. CEO.
Yes, I had it scribbled down on my op plan. I do think it needs to be a project in itself, and whether that's a working group across the different departments of council to sort of just do some pre-feasibility thinking around where the opportunities may be, and then determining different providers or entities we might be able to get some costings or something for. It's sort of starting small, I guess, but I really appreciate the work that you're doing and thinking about. And yeah, I guess I'm thinking we need a dedicated effort, because as you say, if it's ad hoc, then what happens is we don't always get there. It sort of goes on the bottom of the list. And I do think this is an area where council could make considerable savings and better outcomes for the environment. So, yeah, if it could be noted for the op plan, some sort of audit working group, I don't know the functions, but just something that brings us together and really lets us think about this through that lens, I think is really important. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. Further speakers? Okay, so recommended that the responses to the questions raised be received and noted. Do we have a mover? Councillor Duff, seconded. Councillor Henson, thank you. Anything further? Further speakers to the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you all. We'll now call the meeting to a close. Thank you all for your engagement today, and have a wonderful rest of day.